It's Michelle, and I've got another adorable little bead charm for you today. Today we're going to be doing graduation bead charms, and as the thought process progressed, I kind of added to my idea a little bit, so I'm going to show you 3 different versions today. And we're going to be doing a cap and gown for graduation. And I came up with this idea because my daughter is graduating high school this month, and I'll show you what kind of sparked the original idea. Like I said, my daughter is graduating, and I was kind of thinking in graduation mode. That's kind of the way that I do it. I just kind of get my mindset on the occasion and sort of the things that are related to that, and then I just kind of browse through craft supplies in the store or online and see what ideas come into my head. So I was at Walmart one day and I came across these flat back embellishments, and they're just an acrylic flat back with a kind of a jewel cut design on it. And with my mindset in graduation mode, of course that looked like a graduation cap to me. And it sparked the idea of a bead charm with a graduation cap, but I knew that it was a little too large for a bead charm. I went ahead and picked them up because it did spark the inspiration, and I thought maybe there's another project where I could use the little bit larger of a piece. Maybe I could come up with something for that. But I started searching after the idea came, and I looked for some smaller ones. And this is what I found online. I changed that a little bit. It did not have a hole in it. Okay, so this was what they originally were when I purchased them, just a flat back embellishment like the larger one that I had first found. But I didn't let that stop me. My son has a Dremel tool, and I went and bought a set of drill bits for that. And this smallest one, if I can bring that into focus, is 1/32 of an inch in size. So I bought those and I fitted it into my son's Dremel tool. And what I did was I laid it on a block of wood so that there was something to catch the bit when I drilled completely through. And I just found center and drilled a hole right through there with that 1/32 inch bit. And I have since been playing around with some other things and making beads out of things that were never intended to be beads. So you can drill a hole in anything, and I've really enjoyed that process too. And then I have this black metal bead cap. It is a perfectly round half circle bead cap in black, and the size on that is 10 millimeters wide by about 5 millimeters thick. And then I have a 4 by 8 millimeter rondelle in black. And then I have a number 11 seed bead in black. And then I have my basic supplies here for every bead charm, which is a head pin, and this is a 2-inch, and a jump ring and a lobster clasp. Okay, so there was my idea for the graduation cap. And so I had found the supplies that I wanted to make that cap, and I said, what is a graduation cap without a tassel? So I had to make a tassel, and I want you guys to look. This is the cutest thing. The tiniest tassel, and I think it's just adorable, and it was just that finishing touch that made me fall in love with this bead charm. And I'm going to be making that from a combination of embroidery floss, and I have that in the red and black because those are my daughter's high school colors. And then I'm going to add in some silver, and for the silver I'm using beading string. And in addition to the threads, I have a 2mm crimp tube. The first thing that we're going to do is to make that tassel. So I'm going to cut off some string, and as you all can see, that is a tiny tassel, but I'm going to cut my string quite a bit larger because I find it difficult using small pieces to try to cut those and tie them off, and just to be able to work with it in such small pieces. So I'm going to cut about 7 inches. That way I have plenty of length to tie it off and to do everything that I need to do. And then we'll just cut away all that excess once we get it all together. Okay, so there is a 7-inch strand of each color. And then I'm going to cut an additional one in black because I'm going to need a little bit longer to work with on that. I'm going to cut about 1 foot in that. Okay, now as you can see, this tassel is much finer than that. I'll leave that laying there so you all can see that to refer to. So what I did was to take my thread apart in strands. Now on the embroidery floss, there are 6 threads in a strand, and so we want to divide that out. And pull out those individual threads. And that is really handy with embroidery floss because it is made that way for embroidery so that you can do finer or bolder embroidery work depending on what you want for your project. So we're going to use 3, and in the embroidery floss there were 6, so I've got 3 more strands here that I can do another one from later. And I'm going to separate 3 strands of my black floss as well. And I'm kind of laying it out with my colors alternating. Of course, it's not going to stay exactly in order the way I put it, but I find if I lay it out that way, at least with the finished product, my colors are evenly distributed. Okay, so now we have the beading string, and that only has 3 strands. So we're going to be using all of that. And I don't think is intended to be used in individual strands the way the embroidery floss is. So it's a little fussier, a little harder to separate. Just be patient and work with it, trying not to get it tangled. So there's 1. And there's 2. And straighten out our 3rd one. And that is our 9 strands that I'm going to be using for my tassel. That's 3 in each of the 3 colors. And then in my longer piece of the black, I'm just going to need 1 thread of that. So I'll just pull that out, lay the rest aside, and then I'm just going to gather these together. Like I said, they won't stay in order exactly, but they are more evenly distributed when you lay them out like that. And then I'm just going to kind of gather them together and fold it in half. And I'm going to put my longer black thread through there. And I'm going to tie that off. Tying that off is one reason that I needed a longer strand, but there's something else that we're going to do too that extra length is going to help with, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now I'm just going to tie all of those together with my longer black thread with one overhand knot, followed by a double overhand knot, now we have all of our strings bound together. Okay, so I'm going to trim my ends here to make sure they're the same length. So I can fit both of those ends through my crimp tube. And then just slide it right past that knot. And you can see how that brings that all together just like a real tassel. And then we're just going to crimp it with our crimping pliers into our back notch first to bend it into that macaroni shape, and then sideways in the front notch folds that in half. And there it is, the perfect little binding for our tassel. So then I'm just going to straighten out my strands and just come in and clip those wherever I think that should be with my scissors. Clean up my edges just a little. And there you have your tiny, tiny tassel. Okay, but for now, I'm going to leave the length on the black strand that we tied that off with and just lay it aside. And then we're going to take our head pin and put on our 4x8 rondelle. And that's just going to kind of nestle inside that cap to steady that on our head pin for us. And before we put the rest, as you can see, they're going to go in the order that would build a graduation cap, which would be the bead cap, followed by the flat back embellishment, and then that seed bead on top as the button. But before we do that, I want to think about how I'm going to attach my tassel. And I tried just tying that off in a knot here where it could slip over the head pin and just be on top of there like that. But I found that with the other elements being so small, the little seed bead for the button and things like that, the knot on my thread it just showed up too much, and I didn't want that. So what I decided to do was to feed that through, and of course my flat back embellishment is going to be flat side up to look more like our graduation cap. So I'm wetting my fingers to kind of get those threads to stick together. I want to feed them both through from the top of my graduation cap through the bottom. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing through my bead cap, going into the rounded end. And then I can tie my knot under there where it'll never be seen. But as you can see, if I just pull that tight, it's going to be too close. So I'm going to stick my tweezers in there as a spacer, just long enough to tie my knot. Okay? Then I can come down here, tie my knot, first with a single overhand knot, then a double, and then also I want to come in with some of my Loctite glue and touch up that knot. At this point I can take my tweezers out and pull that on through just for a minute so I can get to the knot a little bit better, and apply some of my Loctite glue right on that knot. Okay. And now we're going to take our head pin with our rondelle already on it, and to keep that knot from slipping back through, I want to make sure that I take my head pin in between those two threads above the knot. And then up through the bead cap, up through the flat back, and then I can stop right there and go ahead and clip my excess thread and do away with that. And then slide everything down my head pin. Okay? And then I can pull that back through and kind of separate that for a minute. Make sure that our knot is up inside of that. Hidden by our little rondelle on the bottom. And then we put our number 11 seed bead on the top as the button. So then of course we just bend it over at our 90-degree angle, cut it down to about 1/4 of an inch, roll that into a loop with your round nose pliers, and then open up your jump ring, dangle on your graduation cap, and then your lobster clasp, and close it back up. And there you have your graduation cap bead charm. I really, really love this one. This is one of my favorites. And like I told you in the beginning of the video, the thought process kind of continued, and I ended up adding to that a little bit. So I'm going to show you the other versions that I came up with. So So I've already made my other tassels ahead of time, so I can just show you the additional parts on these other two. So on my first one here, you remember that I used the black rondelle just to take up space inside of the cap, because we need to stabilize that and keep it from kind of wobbling on our head pin. So I was looking through some of my beads one day and I thought, if I have to put something inside there anyway, why not go ahead and put a wooden bead, and I'll have an entire graduate's head in the graduation cap. Okay, but as you know, the holes are larger in my wooden beads, so I had to use one of my 3mm sequins. Put that on, and then my wooden bead, and then when we put our cap on, it's going to look like he's wearing it, and that's very cute. I really love that idea. So again, we have to work our tassel through the top, so I'm going to cut that even. I'm going to feed it through my flat back square bead, and then through my bead cap, going into the rounded side, and put my tweezers in between as a spacer, and tie my knot. One single knot, one double knot, and then I can remove my tweezers and pull that through till I can see my knot, and put a little bit of Loctite glue and then take my head pin with my sequin and my wooden bead already on there, and I'm going to make sure that I go between those threads and up through both of those beads, and then clip off my excess. Slide everything down and dangle our tassel off the side. So we put our number 11 seed bead on top of that for our little button. Okay, so I had to come back in. My 3mm sequin wasn't quite big enough, so I came back in with a 4mm, and that seems to be holding a little bit better. And then bend it at a 90-degree angle. Cut it down about 1/4 of an inch. Roll it into a loop, and we can attach another jump ring and lobster clasp. So there's our graduate's head. So far we've got the graduation cap, the graduate's head, and I decided that I was going to build an entire graduate. So we're going to be using all of this just like we did on this one, but below that I'm going to be using a black acrylic flower bead turned upside down to be the graduate's graduation gown. And I found these online, and I'll leave that link for you also. And that is 12 millimeters wide by 16 millimeters tall. So that is going to make the perfect size graduation gown. And I've got another tassel made and ready. And then I'm going to take my 2-inch head pin, and underneath my flower I'm going to put a 4 millimeter bicone, also in black, and that's just going to stabilize our flower bead. Put that on upside down, and a 10 millimeter wooden bead for the head. And now is where we have to add our tassel through our other beads. Wet the tips. Cut those even. And feed that through the flat side of our 12 millimeter square flat back embellishment that we turned into a bead. Then through the rounded side of our bead cap. And again, place our tweezers in between for a spacer, so we'll have that length for our tassel to dangle off the edge. One overhand knot, followed by a double overhand knot. And then remove our tweezers. Pull that through and glue our knot. We take what we've built so far, making sure we feed that in between those two threads so that our knot won't slip through. Going through those two beads, and then we can cut off our excess thread. And then slide it all down. Add our number 11 seed bead button on the top. Bend it over, cut it down to about 1/4 of an inch. Roll that into a loop. And then we can attach your jump ring and lobster clasp. Close that back up. And there's your graduate. So I really hope you guys liked it. This is one of my very favorites. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below. Also comment and let me know which was your favorite out of the 3. So y'all, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Be sure to go over and give me a like on my Facebook page. And Facebook is a really good place that you all can share photos if you recreate any of these crafts. Also be sure and follow me on Pinterest and Instagram. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.